So we finished my series of Fable retrospectives, if you want to call them that. We became a hero in Fable Anniversary, we became a dog-loving hero in Fable 2, and we of course crashed the economy and became the Monarch in Fable 3, all in a day's work. Besides that, we've also explored Fable 2 and 3's DLC, but there is one Fable game that I haven't played, ever. And that is, of course, Fable The Journey for the Xbox 360 Kinect. Now this one's going to be hard going because A, I don't have an Xbox 360 to hand and I also don't have a Kinect. And this game is only compatible with the Xbox 360 Kinect, which means that if you wish to play this game, you need to find them. And as you can imagine, Microsoft discontinued making those years ago. But for the average player, this is a non-issue because nobody wants to play this game anyway. As for me, I was forced to crawl through copious, dodgy eBay listings. The problem being, of course, I needed to find a device that I knew wouldn't blow up the moment I plugged it in. But then, it occurred to me. Hang on a minute. CEX exists. Well, I guess we're doing it then. I'm about to do unethical things to this device. Nobody's ever bought an Xbox 360 and Kinect with intent on playing Fable The Journey and nothing else. With the archaic technology acquired, the plan was quite simple. Plug it in, hope for the best, and play some Fable The Journey. After all, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, I have missed you. Easily mispressed power button. Okay, so let's first talk about the Xbox 360's Kinect. It's pointless criticising old technology, but I do find it quite amusing. The Kinect does work, but it works better, or at least best, in a room that is completely empty aside from having a television, an Xbox and a sofa. It also requires high contrast between you and what's behind you, so if you don't have white walls, though it would probably be alright, it will sometimes get a bit confused. Along with a seriously decluttered space, the other luxury I simply lack is space. So as a result, the Kinect doesn't really respond well to me at all. In fact, for most of this playthrough, you're going to notice the Kinect filming me. I'm being watched by Bill Gates. He's harvesting my metrics. This is my first time ever using a Kinect. I've been, my entire life, incredibly resistant, specifically to innovation regarding how you interact with a game. I'm not interested in VR in the slightest. Handheld gaming consoles are alright, not my cup of tea, but Wii Fit, we go f*** yourself. And my limited usage of the Kinect vindicates that train of thought. I remember joining Xbox Live parties back when the Kinect actually released and wondering why everybody sounded so awful. And it's because they were using these abominations. So it's ironic that the only person who's using one at present is me. Granted, I had to use far less than ideal parameters to do this video, so I can understand that I'm never going to have the best Kinect experience going. I can also understand the idea behind the gimmick of you being the controller. It's a more interactive way to play a game. But that really doesn't change the fact that this is the least interactive gaming experience I've ever had in my tragic life, nor does it change the fact that I can't wait to run this diabolical object over with my car. But I can appreciate that it tried to do something different, and it made Fable The Journey a unique experience for me because I guarantee you I'll never touch a Kinect ever again. But with our Kinect bashing out of the way, let's finally fire up Fable The Journey and bash that instead. After a long-winded introduction telling me how well the Kinect doesn't work, I got my first hands-on experience with the Kinect where I realised the exact same thing. It took about 20 minutes of me faffing with the menu to get the thing to behave itself, but finally it was time to begin. Fable The Journey begins by introducing us to our player protagonist. We're part of a large caravan of dwellers that appear to be moving for some reason. We play as Gabriel. He's got a northern accent and a horse named Saren. He likes playing with his horse in secluded spaces, and please feel free to take that however you wish. But there's a bond there between this boy and his horse that he perhaps doesn't share with any humans. It's relatable. And you root for this guy and his horse until you actually use the horse in gameplay and realise how utterly fucked it is. Because the carriage driving mechanic does actually amount to most of this game's gameplay. You decide its speed and you can also steer it, though you have absolutely no precision whatsoever. The Kinect doesn't do slight movements very well, so the movements have to be pronounced. And that means massive margins in steering if it translates to anything at all. Sometimes the Kinect gets confused because, again, I don't have the space is cluttered, I acknowledge that. But finer control is a particular predicament, and being a man who struggles with finer control when interacting with reality, Doing this for a game was always going to do my head in. But to make matters worse, if you accidentally steer into something that you shouldn't at any speed other than pain, your horse starts losing health and can die. And though that adds challenge, it also makes the fine control point immediately 10 times worse. It didn't take long for the Kinect to feel more like an obstacle than any innovative way to experience this game, and honestly, it was otherwise a quite relaxing experience, so I found myself really soured by the fact that I couldn't use a controller. In my opinion, the only place where one shouldn't be using a controller is in a submersible. But anyway, you grab these experience orbs as you go, and the different colours suggest what speed you need to be going to actually be able to acquire them. Green meaning, for example, you can acquire them at any speed, and the others meaning a specific speed is required, and you can invest those experience orbs into upgrading things. Regardless of what speed you're going, getting the fine steering down to actually be able to collect the orbs is a bit of a challenge. And the faster you're going, the less the input actually behaves, and sometimes it just blatantly ignores you. The safest bet is to look mental when exaggerating input, and that takes relaxation away from what should be a relaxing gaming experience. So after a horse ride that was far more painful than it ever needed to be, and a segment where we have to do it but faster, Gabriel is instructed to not fall asleep and follow the caravan. And of course he falls asleep. So now we need to abuse the horse's stamina meter just to catch up. And if Seren's stamina gets depleted, the horse will start to lose health. So as you can imagine, I spent most of the time absolutely battering the shit out of this poor horse, making it a painful experience for both of us. Anyway, the storm we're now in destroys the bridge separating us from our caravan. Through the power of plot, I guess, I find it odd that a bridge that has stood that long suddenly crumbles because of a bit of lightning and some rain. I find it hard to believe this is the first example of inclement weather it's had to put up with, but there we go. Gabriel is now separated from his family, though they're probably quite grateful. He's gone, he's no longer our issue, serves him right, he can't even ride in a straight line. And that is basically the game's plot. We have to take the long way, that's kind of it. Welcome to Fable the Journey, it's an interactive horse riding simulator of pain. Sadly, the game is far from over, and yeah, the horse riding doesn't really get much better. In fact, it just completely stopped responding to me for some reason. I was very confused, but we got there eventually. You're supposed to slow down for rocky obstructions on the road, but I just couldn't give a shit, apparently. I kept colliding with things and damaging Seren's health. This game is truly the safest way to experience drunk driving, and after a while of this agony, something finally happens. He meets a mysterious blind woman being chased by some strange entity in the forest. And now we're introduced to the amazing mechanic of horse riding but with more intensity. This goo is coming for us. I'll still trying to get used to the Kinect's finer controls in my less than ideal setup at this point, so as you can imagine I died an awful lot. And it got so bad that I kind of just peacefully decided, you know what, for now I give up. That was a mistake. As it turns out, I'd forgotten to log into an Xbox account, so all of my progress had just been wiped. Yeah, it could have been worse. I could have been far later into the game and therefore less likely to start again. So the next time I fired up the game, I created an account named Fugus. He is coming for your skin. In fairness, it didn't take me terribly long to get back to where I was, but I was certainly peeved as this game has hardly been engaging so far. But I am glad I realised my mistake before I cleared this segment because, in my opinion, it's total unfettered agony. It would probably be a lot easier were my setup not totally shocking for the Kinect, so it is partially my fault, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the Kinect is an unadaptable piece of shit. But I did eventually manage to find my way around these troubles, which made me very pleased with myself. Stating the obvious, the blind lady is of course Teresa, and in this story she comes dangerously close to actually being a character. She retains the same actor, making her the only authentically Fable thing about this game. But Fable's witty, provocative, and at times outright absurd sense of humour is nowhere to be seen. Instead, the game settles for showing you just how done with your own life you look. The point of Fable is entirely lost in this game. Sure, the game's unengaging controls really don't help, but it feels as if this was all part of the Kinect's marketing campaign rather than being intent on doing anything remotely related to actually being Fable. Instead, we're left with a far more somber, more sincere narrative, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but this is Fable we're talking about. That absurd charisma is the franchise's main selling point. The absence of it for the most part means that Whatever this game does well, other games do better, and you can find it elsewhere without having to put up with this shit. From there, the unrefined technology really subtracts from what is an almost interesting main storyline. Speaking of which, at this point in the story, we're introduced to the concept of mending the horse, which includes pulling out foreign objects slowly and gradually, so naturally I tried to yank it out instantly. It didn't work. I wish it did. This horse is living a life of luxury and doesn't even know it, because in reality it would probably just be shot. But anyway, there we go, it lives to get abused another day. Or maybe not, as it turns out she's been poisoned. But it's alright because Teresa conveniently knows of a magical cave in which Saren the horse might be saved. I know horses don't appear very often in Fable, but it's not that special, Jesus. The worst part is I almost want to take this slowly so at least I don't have to ride this thing for the rest of the game. Oh yeah, this game has an upgrade system. That exists, who cares. But anyway, we've made it to the magical cave now. The Spirit Chambers is what they're called. And there is a tree in this cave, somehow. And finally here we get off the bloody horse. We start playing around with some water for a bit because I guess the Kinect reaches its limits well before we get to do anything interesting. And the water starts showing us things. Gabriel is literally witnessing Vietnam. We're eventually transported elsewhere where we've got these magical gauntlet thingies. And here we're introduced to a tutorial on the game's combat, and this is about as engaging as Fable The Journey gets. And you think it's straightforward, you effectively cast spells and that's all. It shouldn't be that painful, right? Wrong, this is painful. To hit your enemy you need to effectively aim to where it is on the screen. The problem is, the Kinect isn't your screen, so dead center is actually lower than you think it is. To get something to actually hit high up, you need to effectively throw your arm as far into the air as you can physically get it to go. It's not a terrible combat system, I wouldn't say it's interesting, but its big limiting factor is the fact that the Kinect sucks. And then there are the more sophisticated actions that go along with it that require you to get things just about fully perfectly to work. Which sometimes can be great, but the Kinect also has to then register that you've indeed done that. Safe to say it has a hard time. The positive to this combat system is it is quite forgiving and patient with you. But it might actually just be being patient with itself. Not only does this combat frustrate the player, it also feels as if it frustrates the controller itself, and I'd never thought I'd say that. Ever. It physically hurts, and as you can imagine, just like the horse riding, or carriage driving, which is probably a more accurate description, you're exposed to the shortcomings of that system an awful lot. But it could be worse, right? You're absolutely right it can. Introducing combat carriage driving. Now I'd love to know whose idea that was, but we've escaped the cave and now we have magical gauntlets glued to our fingertips. You can't reasonably expect Gabriel to do gentleman things with all the added weight, can you? Gabriel's a hero now and that's nice. At this point I was only about 2 hours deep into the playthrough, but I'm not necessarily going to pretend it didn't feel like an awful lot longer. All you're doing is steering a horse, choosing its speed and hoping that you hit the orbs. When that's not happening, there's a cutscene playing in which Fable's core identity is nowhere to be seen. When you're not doing that, you're caressing your horse's ass, and once that's over and done with, you're fighting things as badly as the Kinect allows you to. At this point, the idea of making pies in Fable 3 felt like a wet dream from heaven. You can see my very will to live slipping from my body, and yet I persevered. At this point, I knew I wasn't going to bother getting to the end of this game, so I decided to go as long as I could until I just gave up. And who knows, the more you get used to the scuffed nature of, say, the Kinect, hopefully, the more usable it becomes, at least to me. Right? Sadly that one didn't ring true, but at least the exploring meant that I had some company in Teresa, though sadly her statements are so incredibly vague that she's only ever deflecting anything that Gabriel is asking her, and sometimes she's just frankly waffling about nothing at all. At least every now and then you might encounter a funny looking character at the side of the road though.
What you seek is for me to wallpaper your dining room a week next Thursday?
Maybe you could just tell me my future? Do I have to cross your palm with silver?
What? Silver? Oh, yes, that's right, silver. You must cross my palm with silver.
I don't have any silver.
funnily enough, those interactions with a random methamphetamine addict at the side of the road are the best, most Fable parts of the game. It's just a shame they're so easily missable because the horse doesn't always stop when you try to get it to, and there is no input for reversing. Eventually we come across a nice looking shack at the side of the road, and of course it's inhabited entirely by Hobs.
Sorry, my mistake.
My god, the state of him. For those who are unfamiliar, Hobs are effectively the goblins of the Fable universe. They're funny things to look at and they remind me of French bulldogs. And by that I mean they're utterly hideous. If you happen to own a French bulldog, I have nothing against your dog. I just want to make that perfectly clear. But look at it and then tell me it's not ugly. To be fair, this one's quite an appealing example. Massacring Hobs in the Fable universe never fails to entertain. But this game makes a pretty good case for that statement being false. There are positives to the combat system that I haven't brought up. That arcade feel, there's certainly a place for it, and I can appreciate and respect what it's trying to do, even if that's only because it's all a Kinect can do. But considering most people in the world won't have the ideal setup for this system to have ever worked, I can also understand why it might not have been well received. And me, being somebody without a particularly useful setup, it's quite cluttered in this room, I won't lie, it's a tip. The system was simple enough to work, but the simplicity was too complicated for the Kinect to work well. All I'm saying is, with every second of playing this game, I'm understanding more and more why this device did not catch on. That said, with the advancements of the technology, there's no reason why it couldn't do in the future. Whether or not there is, or ever was a market for it though, remains to be seen. But considering I managed to buy that thing and an old Xbox 360 and Fable the Journey for a total of about £70, the ship has beyond sailed for this generation. Why am I even doing this to myself? Anyway, we move on and get attacked by yet more Hobs, and these ones happen to be on pigback, so we get that carriage combat that I was talking about before. The combination of two painful mechanics to make an agony mechanic, which sounds like the name of a television show in which dilapidated bangers become performance cars. Despite not being particularly fun and sometimes being a little bit less than responsive, like I said, the system is quite lenient, so I didn't find myself dying an awful lot, I just found myself shooting the air for some reason. But this time around at least my will to live remained relatively intact. As you venture along your journey, you can find chests inside which you will ordinarily find some caliber of pointless collectible. In this one, for example, we found a gnome. What I wouldn't give to have this guy hurling abuse at me 24/7. Ordinarily, these chests come with combat obstacles that aren't too hard, and they're usually wasps. But with that covered, we can move on. We found the guy at the side of the road again. That's nice.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Benny the Magnificent, although most people
Call you Jeffrey. You're a part-time mystic with no discernible psychic powers, who also runs a painting and decorating business at the expense of a burgeoning trichology clinic for balding.
How did he get here so quickly?
Just in case it needed clarifying, we are once again fighting Hobs. But this time around we have a minecart, and that's another positive in this game's favour. It knows how to shake it up every now and then just to make sure that more often than not there's something unique about the scenario you find yourself in. Whether or not that makes it better is unclear. These minecarts in this segment, they actually made for quite an enjoyable time. But that's kind of the bare minimum you'd expect from an on-rails linear experience though. But a positive is indeed a positive. Out of everything that I played, I want to say this minecart segment was my favourite because it added a bit of intensity to it. The issue with the Kinect responding a little bit funny prevails, but at least I felt engaged at this point, even if I don't look it. But that can't save somebody from the remaining hours of monotony to come. Anyway, at this point we made a friend. I can't remember his name, so we'll call him Dave.
Nothing to worry about.
Get down!
Not seen magic in these parts for many a year. Fergus is the name.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with Dave. Gabriel is far too pleased to have a friend who isn't a blind woman who superglued gloves to his hands with the use of magic. And then we crack on to his village.
Straight on till you come to a tree shaped like an accordion. From there, well, it's very close.
4, maybe 5 miles at most.
Actually, that is quite far.
Eventually arriving, Teresa goes to bed, leaving Gabriel and Dave to get up to some late night tomfoolery. We're pulling on chains now, and no, that is not a euphemism. Chicken damaging mechanics. Let's go. I wish we could just punt them like the good old days, but you know what? This is the second best thing. After that much time lobbing chickens around, I was exhausted and drenched in sweat, at which point Dave starts talking about his dead wife. But before that train of thought can conclude, Balverines attack the village. So anyway, I blew a Balverine up, started killing its mates, but honestly I was fully fed up with the game by this point, and I had absolutely no desire to persevere any further. I can't have even gotten halfway unless this game is worse than I already think, and yet still, I gave up. Thank you for all your encouraging comments about this particular video, but if you're thinking about picking up Fable the Journey and playing it, leave it in 2012 where it belongs and go and see a dominatrix instead, because apparently it's much less painful. Thank you for watching, I'm going to bed.